In 1927, 5 dying women filed suit against one of the most powerful corporations in America. Several could no longer walk unassisted. Their lawyer had taken the case knowing the statute of limitations had nearly run out. The company's legal strategy was delay, calculated on the assumption that the plaintiffs would not survive long enough to see a verdict. 2 of them did not. The legal precedent they established is still in force today. The factory floor smells of metal and chalk dust, and it glows. In the dark, these women are luminescent. Their teeth, their hair, their clothing, all phosphorescent with radium residue. Some paint the substance onto their skin before leaving for the evening, wearing it as jewelry. They walk home glowing, and no one tells them to stop. This is the history of the Radium Girls, a case of corporate suppression, scientific negligence, and legal precedent that reshaped American labor law. In 1898, Marie Curie isolated radium in her Paris laboratory. Within a decade, it had become a commercial phenomenon. Newspapers described it as liquid sunshine. It was marketed in toothpaste, face cream, drinking water, and chocolate. The glow, widely interpreted as a sign of vitality, made the substance enormously popular. Radium was marketed in toothpaste, face cream, drinking water, and chocolate. It appeared in pharmacies across the country, sold as a health product. The glow was interpreted as evidence of vitality. When the United States entered World War I in 1917, military demand created a specific application. Soldiers needed to read their watches in darkness. Radium-painted dials provided a reliable solution. The United States Radium Corporation established production facilities in New Jersey and later in Illinois. They required painters, hundreds of them. The work paid nearly twice the standard factory rate. It was considered safe. The position was regarded as desirable. The painting technique was called lip pointing. To achieve the fine tip required for precise dial work, painters were instructed to place the brush between their lips, draw it to a point, dip it into the radium paint, and apply it to the dial face. This was repeated continuously throughout the working day. Company supervisors and physicians told workers the paint was harmless. Radium was in consumer products across the country. It was associated with health and modernity. There was no reason for most workers to question this. What the company did not disclose was that radium is radioactive and that radioactive exposure destroys living tissue. The scientists employed at the same facility wore lead aprons and used metal tongs when handling radium samples. They did not touch the material directly. The dial painters, separated from the scientific staff by a partition, worked without any protective equipment. By 1920, symptoms were appearing among the workforce. Amelia Maggia, a dial painter in Orange, developed a persistent toothache. A dentist extracted the tooth. The jaw did not heal. The bone began to deteriorate, to disintegrate under examination. When the dentist touched it, the bone came away in his hand. Amelia Maggia died in September 1922. She was 24 years old. The cause of death listed on her death certificate, attributed by a company-appointed physician, was syphilis. Later investigation established this diagnosis was false and had been entered deliberately. Maggia was not an isolated case. By 1923, multiple women from the same facility presented with similar symptoms: tooth loss, spontaneous bone fractures, anemia, and necrosis of the jaw. In 1924, a Harvard physician named Cecil Drinker was engaged to investigate conditions at the factory. His findings were unambiguous. The dial painters were being poisoned by the radium paint. He submitted his report to the company. The company altered it, changing data and conclusions, and released a falsified version to the public, claiming workers showed no signs of illness. Drinker's original findings were filed and not disclosed to the workforce. Drinker's original findings were not disclosed to the workforce. Production at the factory continued without change. The same process was underway in Ottawa, Illinois, where the Radium Dial Company employed young women from the town in identical working conditions. Many were teenagers. Grace Fryer had worked at the Orange facility. By 1925, she had developed persistent back pain and her teeth were failing. A physician connected her condition to her prior employment. She sought legal representation. No attorney would take her case. Under New Jersey law at the time, the statute of limitations for personal injury claims began at the date of the injury, not the date of diagnosis. By the time a worker understood the source of their illness, the window to file suit had, in most cases, already closed. Fryer spent 2 years seeking representation. In 1927, an attorney named Raymond Berry agreed to take her case. He also agreed to represent 4 other affected women: Edna Husman, Catherine Schaub, Albina Lorice, and Quinta McDonald. Newspaper coverage of the case was extensive. The 5 plaintiffs were referred to collectively as the Radium Girls. Several could no longer walk unassisted by the time proceedings began. The company's legal response was procedural delay. Each motion extended the timeline. The plaintiffs' deteriorating health was a known factor. By 1928, press coverage of the case had become national. Journalists gathered outside the courthouse. Public attention was significant. In May 1928, the 5 women gave testimony. Some were carried into the courtroom. Some could barely walk. In June 1928, the case was settled out of court. Each woman received $10,000, equivalent to roughly $160,000 today, along with an annual medical stipend for the remainder of her life. For several of the plaintiffs, that remainder was measured in months. In Ottawa, the Radium Dial Company continued operations. The New Jersey settlement was not communicated to the Illinois workforce. Catherine Wolfe Donahue had begun working at Radium Dial in 1922. By 1933, she was seriously ill. By 1937, she could move only with significant difficulty. She filed suit against Radium Dial in 1938. The Illinois Industrial Commission held hearings. Donahue gave her testimony from a stretcher, attended by a nurse, her husband seated beside her. The commission ruled in her favor in July 1938. The company filed an appeal. Catherine Donahue died in July 1938. The same month, she won her case. She was 35 years old. The Illinois Supreme Court upheld the Commission's ruling against Radium Dial in 1939, establishing corporate liability for occupational illness as enforceable precedent. The cases contributed to the gradual reform of occupational liability law, the principle that employers bear responsibility for health conditions caused by working conditions. This shift consolidated over the following decades alongside organized labor advocacy, culminated in the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970. On the scientific side, the women's bodies provided a unique body of evidence. Radium, once ingested, bonds to bone and does not leave the body. Research conducted on affected workers directly informed the radiation safety standards later applied to nuclear industry workers and medical radiation therapy patients. The maximum permissible dose calculations developed by researchers, including Robley Evans at MIT, drew explicitly on data from the Radium Girls cases. Those standards remain the foundation of radiation protection guidelines used today. The former factory site in Orange, New Jersey, is now occupied by residential and commercial buildings. The soil and groundwater in the surrounding area remain measurably contaminated with radium. Remediation work at multiple New Jersey and Illinois sites has cost tens of millions of dollars and continues. Environmental remediation workers continue testing soil and groundwater at affected sites across New Jersey and Illinois decades after the factories closed. Several of the Radium Girls are buried at St. Columba Cemetery in Ottawa, Illinois. Scientific measurements have confirmed that their remains retain measurable radioactivity. Radium-226 has a half-life of 1,600 years. The substance will remain detectable in the soil of that cemetery for centuries. Marie Curie, who discovered radium, died in 1934 of aplastic anemia, a condition almost certainly connected to her decades of radiation exposure. Her personal notebooks remain radioactive and are stored in lead-lined cases at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. Researchers who access them are required to sign liability waivers. The radium consumer products industry collapsed in the early 1930s as the evidence of harm became irrefutable. Researchers estimate that more than 4,000 dial painters were employed in American facilities between 1917 and 1926 alone. The full health toll was never comprehensively documented. Before the New Jersey cases, the prevailing legal position in American corporate law was that employers bore no responsibility for occupational illness caused by their working conditions. The Radium Girls cases were among the first to challenge that position successfully. The Occupational Safety and Health Act was signed into law in December 1970, creating federal standards for workplace safety across American industries. The legal and scientific groundwork laid by the Radium Girls cases was among the precedents that made it possible. Every workplace safety inspection, every occupational exposure limit, every hazardous materials warning label, these exist within a regulatory framework built incrementally over decades, beginning in part with the legal actions taken by 5 women in New Jersey in 1927. Grace Fryer, Amelia Maggia, Edna Hussman, Catherine Schaub, Quinta McDonald, Albina Larice, Catherine Donahue. The documented cases are part of the public record. The legal framework they produced remains in force. The cases of the Radium Girls were not simply about the dangers of one substance. They concerned the conditions under which employers are permitted to expose workers to known hazards without disclosure, the legal mechanisms available to workers seeking remedy, and the gap between institutional knowledge and public knowledge when the two are held by parties with conflicting interests. Grace Fryer stated in 1928 that her primary objective was not financial compensation, but public disclosure of what had occurred. She wanted people to know what had happened. If you found this history useful, leave a comment and share it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Next time, we go somewhere new. As always, we'll see you in the past.